At the Tahrir Institute for Middle East Policy. He joins us now live via Skype from Cairo. Thank you for joining us here on Al Jazeera. In the past hour, we heard from President al-Sisi promising that he would deal with it with an iron fist, and then we get reports of airstrikes very close to where the attack took place. Is this, I guess, the sort of response we can expect from President Sisi?
Well, it's certainly predictable that there would be a high-profile military campaign in response to the attacks that we saw earlier today, which is, I believe, the largest death toll from a terrorist attack in the modern history of Egypt. The question that we have that we've been asking for quite some time is this strategy effective enough? And the concern that many of us, including myself, share is that the kind of scorched earth approach that the government has undertaken doesn't help really combat long-term the threat of terrorism coming from Sinai by making people's life in Sinai so difficult with extremely draconian curfews and a lot of crackdowns and roundups that aren't often very surgical. We run the risk of ISIS finding it easier to recruit people and easier to find safe haven. And so the important thing is to look at approaching this with a more sophisticated strategy that balances the need to be decisive at times with the need to build a coalition that can really deny ISIS any ability to operate in Sinai.
I mean, it has to be said, no one has officially claimed responsibility for this attack just yet. But we were reading earlier just how many attacks there have been in Sinai, that this is really nothing new. But what do you make of the differences, the specifics about this one, the number of dead, obviously a massive attack, and also the target, a mosque?
Well, the number is unprecedented, as I said. Even the Metrojet attack that we saw in Sinai a couple of years back killed 224 people, so 235 is the largest death toll that Egyptians have ever seen from a terrorist attack. The mosque is known to be a Sufi mosque, so there's a reasonable theory that to an extent this is part of ISIS's kind of view that Sufis are heretical, and so it would, for them, legitimize them as targets. That has to be coupled with reports that this mosque is one that members of the Sawarka tribe attend, who have been who are seen as collaborating with the government by ISIS. And as you mentioned earlier in your report, we have seen a number of attacks against people in Sinai over the view by ISIS that they're collaborators and thus enemies. And it's part of but this is also part of a really troubling trend with ISIS's attacks this past year, in which high-profile attacks on civilian targets are happening more and more often. It started with a lot of attacks on churches and a group of Christians traveling to visit a monastery. Now we have this attack on another place of worship. It's a scary trend. It's a dangerous trend, and it gives one a lot of concerns about the safety of civilians now in Egypt when Sinai is willing to target them as well.
Timothy Kaldas, non-resident fellow at the Tahrir Institute for Middle East Policy. Thank you. Well, staying with the story, international condemnation of the attack has been quick. The White House has called on the international community to strengthen efforts to defeat terrorist groups. U.S. President Donald Trump also tweeted, calling it a horrible and cowardly terrorist attack on defenseless worshippers. Israel's hardline education minister, Naftali Bennett, also says it's time for international unity in the war on terror. And the British Prime Minister, Theresa May, says she is appalled by the sickening attack and sends condolences to all those affected. OK, let's bring you some breaking news from here in London. Those scenes you're seeing are from central London, Oxford Street. Now, British police are responding to what they're calling a customer